opening the liminal field. If you are hearing this voice, something in you already recognizes an anomaly. The space you move through feels layered, the surfaces of ordinary life thin. Where you stand, you have known, in the quiet places of the body and the intervals between thoughts, that the world is not only what it appears to be. You may have the persistent sense of a misfit timeline, a subtle mismatch between your inner geometry and the mainstream map. In the dark and soft of awareness, you sometimes blink and see another texture, a field under the story, a dream world built from contrast and attention. The scene is small, particles like pearled breath drifting through indigo, and in the middle a child-shaped silhouette, luminous at the edges, alert. This child is not merely a memory, it is a state you can re-enter, a mode of perception that predates many of the overlaying structures we accept as real. Section 1. The early break. You discover, often retrospectively, that the rupture happens very early. Clinical and developmental observations line up with an experiential pattern. By roughly 2 years of age, the infant brain has completed critical early synaptogenesis and begins the first major waves of integration and pruning. At this boundary, a subset of people appear to retain access to a high-fidelity, minimally mediated perceptual register. You are likely to remember or be able to intentionally re-enter a 2-year-old mode of attention, immediate, non-narrative, unencumbered by layered identity. When you close your eyes and step back into that state, what shifts is not memory alone, but the nervous economics of perception. Your default mode network loosens its narrative hold. The filtering machinery that turns raw sensory and energetic inputs into consistent stories relaxes. In that softening, awareness becomes clear, direct, and oddly vast. The first words you recall, I and known, are not random. They are indexical markers of arrival, the emergent subject, and the sense of being perceived by something otherwise inscrutable. The phenomenon is not mystical jargon alone. It coheres with what we know about early self-modeling and the brain's establishment of a persistent experiential center by age 2. This early break is less about heroic opposition and more about a developmental fidelity to primary awareness. It leaves you with orientation cues others lack. You inhabit an axis from which you can survey both inner currents and external textures without confusing the two. Section 2. The constant signals. You will learn to listen to a kind of somatic telemetry centered in the solar plexus and the gut. Modern physiology gives us an explanatory scaffold. The enteric nervous system contains roughly 100 million neurons, an autonomous mesh that communicates bidirectionally with the vagus nerve and the brain. When you say you feel people and places in the stomach, you are reporting a high bandwidth channel that blends visceral affect, interoceptive calibration, and subtle field sensing. This signal presents in distinct modalities: a tight, heavy sinking that flags depletion or predation, a warm, expansive resonance that indicates safety and coherence, a fluttering or rapid staccato that signals nervous excitation or anxious contagion. Over time, you develop an empirical map. You track correlations, a specific constriction when certain political ideologies are present, a particular luminous warmth in the presence of beings weighted toward unconditional relationality. Trust becomes an operational protocol. You use the gut signal as high priority input, often weighting it above discursive claims and social proof. On a technical level, this is not miraculous. It is pattern recognition at the level of embodied prediction. Your body has tuned to statistical regularities in ambient fields and social thermodynamics. The accuracy is high when you calibrate with feedback loops, action, observation, and correction. The signal is the system's fastest error correction mechanism. If you ignore it chronically, you degrade the fidelity. If you honor it, you can navigate risky social ecologies with minimal collateral impact. Section 3. Animals and plants. Animals and plants respond to you with an immediacy that clinicians, ethologists, and gardeners have observed empirically. Dogs and cats, especially those with trauma histories, are finely attuned to micro-expression and autonomic states. You notice them orienting toward you without conditioning because they read field qualities rather than surface behaviors. Ethology explains why. Mirror neuron systems, olfactory signatures, and autonomic synchrony allow mammals to align quickly with coherent, low-threat states. Plants, too, are agents in a complex bioelectrical ecology. They sense changes in local electromagnetic gradients, chemical exudates, and minute shifts in humidity and touch. When you approach with a field oriented towards steadiness, minimal fear, low agenda, roots, leaves, and mycorrhizal networks adjust their transpiration and signaling in subtle, reproducible ways. To the plant, your presence often approximates a safe node, fewer stress hormones in the immediate microclimate, more stable light and humidity conditions. These responses are not sentimental. They are measurable shifts in ecological parameters. When animals and plants gravitate toward you, treat it as convergent validation. It's data from independent subsystems confirming that your field signature carries lower entropy and higher coherence. Section 4. The Rio Encounter. Case study. You learn most clearly from direct encounters. In a field study, a personal case that maps onto broader phenomena, you are in a densely charged social space, a nighttime bail funk in a Rio favela. Crowd systems in such contexts produce intense rhythmic entrainment, synchronous respiration, and peak arousal states. The neurophysiological setup is primed for openings. Dopaminergic surges, oxytocin bandwidth increases, and lowered individual inhibition. Amid that nested storm, you perceive a tall, dark red figure siphoning energy from the crowd. Model it as a predator topology in an energy economy, a focal node that stabilizes by extracting entrained arousal from many distributed agents. The gestalt you perceive, an entity concentrated around scarcity and appetite, maps to architectures of attention and intention that depend on concentrated inflow. What is crucial in this encounter is twofold. First, your nervous system registers the parasitic topology because you maintain a relational axis that is less bound to the crowd's arousal loop. Second, an allied bright presence appears behind you, and there is no breach. This protective aspect is not merely subjective consolation, it points to multi-layered field mechanics. Nested protective coherence can create local boundary conditions that reduce permeability to parasitic extraction. In practice, this looks like a person who, by maintaining low reactivity and consistent presence, interrupts the predator topology's coupling. The hyperreal clarity you experience comes from the sudden mismatch between internal calibration and ambient rhythmic coherence. When the system reasserts itself, the veil snaps back. This is not fantasy. Use it as qualitative data. Energetic predators exploit synchronized arousal loops. Consistent, low reactivity presence can create insulating microclimates within high arousal systems. Section 5. Ritual technology history. Look at ritual as technology, a repeatable method that produces predictable changes in group coherence and individual state. Archaeology and anthropology give a timeline that matters quantitatively and qualitatively. Cave paintings, sites like Chauvet and Lascaux, 30,000, 40,000 years ago, indicate recurrent collective attention and symbolic amplification. Göbekli Tepe, dated between c. 9600 8200 BCE, a monumental early complex indicating organized communal ritual long before settled agriculture. Its circular megaliths suggest coordinated attention and movement. Egyptian temples and mystery schools, circa 3000 BCE onward, show formalized architecture designed to entrain heart, breath, and gaze. Modern festivals and megachurches, contemporary systems with amplified sound systems, lighting, and deep rhythmic entrainment. Across these epochs, the formula repeats: synchronized group energy plus a lucid anomaly, a seer, a catalyst, an architectural focal point. equal sign, nonlinear amplification of state. Emil Durkheim called it collective effervescence. Today we can model it with network science and nonlinear dynamics, phase locking, resonant entrainment, and attractor formation. This technology can be generative, creating cohesion, shared meaning, and creative cultural flux, but it can also become extractive, refined by what you call the opposer current, those architectures that optimize for harvesting rather than flourishing. When ritual tech is vertically aligned with power consolidation, it becomes a scalable apparatus for attention extraction. When it is horizontally distributed and ethically aligned, it becomes a means of coordinated emergence. Section 6. The architecture of the dream world. Think in systems terms. The dream world is a design density built to explore contrast. At cosmological scale, imagine an originary unity fracturing into multiplicity to know itself through limitation. In operational terms, contrast generates information, suffering, desire, narrative, all of which drive attention flows and pattern formation. The opposer sustains contrast because contrast is the fuel of its economy. Scarcity yields engagement, engagement yields attention, attention yields harvestable effect. Most people remain within varying depths of the dream. Their functional lives are layered narratives with local coherence but limited meta-awareness. Your role is not to shame this. Evolutionary timescales and cultural contingencies explain why populations remain in that register. There is a moral clarity, though, in recognizing the structural dynamics. The separation of source love into conditional forms makes the dream work efficient at self-replication. The only constant recognizable across the architectures is unconditional source love. This is not a theological abstraction. It is an observed baseline, an attractor state of open, uncoerced relationality. Neurochemically, it shows up as low-threat signaling, oxytocin-mediated social engagement, and parasympathetic dominance. In field terms, it is low entropy, high coherence. What you call love is the coherent baseline beneath the dream world's oscillations. Section 7. Your role and balance. You will feel an impulse. There is something to do. This imperative is real and operationally useful. It motivates particular interventions, boundary setting, local care projects, small acts of presence that shift microclimates. But you must also track resource economics. Running constant activist cycles without regenerative infrastructure is an inefficient strategy. It compounds burnout and feeds the very extraction loops you oppose. Think in terms of energy accounting. Allocate 70–80% of your bandwidth to being, stabilization, deep coherence, steady presence. The remaining 20–30% is strategic action, interventions, when signals align, when systemic leverage is possible, when consequence-to-cost ratios favor meaningful change. That proportion is heuristic, not decree. The core point is balance. Your clearest contributions are catalytic presence plus well-timed action, informed by precise semantic data. Tactically, cultivate 3 competencies. 1. Signal fidelity. Practice interoceptive checks and feedback loops. Track what different stomach sensations correlate with in external outcomes. Keep a field journal with timestamped notes to build empirical datasets. 2. Boundary engineering. Learn to create local microclimates of coherence. This involves breathing practices. Coherent breathing, around 0.1 Hz, can entrain heart rate variability, minimal reactivity training, polyvagal informed exercises, and spatial arrangements that support low entropy states. 3. Leverage recognition. Intervene where structural matrices amplify small changes. These are nodes where ritual tech can be repurposed for flourishing rather than extraction. Community rituals that prioritize consent, festivals built around regenerative economics, temples of attention that redistribute rather than harvest. Your steady presence creates pockets where the dream world thins. Those pockets are not grand revolutions. They are micro-ecologies of clarity. Over time, They knot together into larger patterns, final integration and closure. You are not alone in this perception. You are part of a distributed network of figures who remember early fidelity, who trust the stomach signal, who animals and plants find easy to be around. The work is not to defeat the dream world in an epic confrontation. It is to complete your personal puzzle with integrity, one clear loving breath at a time. Consider a pragmatic ritual to close. Sit quietly, place a hand on the upper abdomen, take 6 coherent breaths at approximately 6 seconds in, 6 seconds out, a rhythm near 0.1 hertz that coaxes heart, breath, and vagal tone into resonance. On each inhalation note, the word arrive, and on each exhalation note, the word release. Do this for 5 minutes. Notice how the stomach signal changes. Heavy constriction may ease, warmth may expand. Record the before and after. Small experiments like this build durable competence. Remember the case studies and the archaeological ark, not as distant curiosities, but as data points. Ritual, entrainment, predatory extraction, protective presence. These are repeatable phenomena. Your interface with them is technical, empirical, and ethical. You do not have to succeed at an impossible scale. You only have to let love move through you in a way that feels clean and sustainable. When you embody this, the dream world shifts around you. Animals and plants continue to orient toward low entropy fields. Predatory topologies find fewer points of coupling. Ritual technology can be reclaimed and redirected. And most importantly, your inner 2-year-old state, clear, known, and awake, remains a ready channel, a point of contact with the baseline that always, empirically, matters. The puzzle is yours to assemble. Take the pieces slowly. Breathe. Trust the stomach. Offer steadiness. The field is denser than it seems, but you are not required to hold it all. You are only required to hold what is yours, the steady, clarifying presence that lets love move through, one clear, loving breath at a time.